Elena had always been a woman who valued stability and tradition. At 50 years old, she had lived most of her life in the small, picturesque town of Maplewood. Nestled in the heart of the countryside, Maplewood was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and the pace of life was slow and steady. Elena had been born and raised there, the only child of a well-respected couple who ran the local bakery. Her parents had instilled in her a strong sense of duty, loyalty, and the importance of maintaining a good reputation. As a young woman, Elena had been strikingly beautiful, with auburn hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders and eyes the color of the deep green forest that surrounded the town. Her beauty, combined with her gentle nature and strong moral values, had made her one of the most sought-after women in Maplewood. At the age of 23, she had married Richard, a local businessman who was 10 years her senior. Richard was kind, reliable, and deeply in love with Elena. Their marriage was a happy one, filled with mutual respect and shared dreams. For nearly 20 years, Elena and Richard lived a comfortable life. They were the picture of marital bliss, often seen walking hand in hand through the town or hosting dinner parties for their close-knit circle of friends. Elena took pride in her role as a wife and later as a mother when they had their only child, Emily. Emily was the light of their lives, and Elena devoted herself to raising her daughter with the same values and care that she had been raised with. However, tragedy struck when Emily was just 10 years old. Richard was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. The illness took him swiftly, and within a year, Elena found herself a widow at the age of 42. The loss of Richard was devastating. He had been her rock, her partner in everything, and without him, she felt adrift. The years that followed were lonely and difficult. Elena threw herself into her work, running the bakery after her parents passed away, and raising Emily, who had grown into a bright and independent young woman. Emily eventually moved away to attend college, leaving Elena alone in the family home. Though she kept herself busy with work and the occasional social event, the loneliness crept in during the quiet evenings and long weekends. She had friends, of course, but most of them were either married or busy with their own lives. Elena often found herself wondering if she would ever experience love again, or if the rest of her life would be spent in quiet solitude. It was during one of these lonely periods that she met Lucas. Lucas was 20 years old, a handsome young man with a troubled past. He had arrived in Maplewood a few months earlier, seeking a fresh start after a series of bad decisions had left him estranged from his family and friends. Lucas had grown up in a large city, where the pace of life was fast, and the opportunities for trouble were plenty. His father had left when he was just a boy, and his mother, though loving, had struggled to keep him on the right path. By the time he was 18, Lucas had fallen in with the wrong crowd, and his life had spiraled out of control. In an attempt to turn his life around, Lucas decided to leave the city and all its temptations behind. He had heard about Maplewood from an old friend who had passed through the town years earlier. It seemed like the perfect place to start over a small, quiet town where no one knew him or his past. He arrived with little more than a few bags of belongings and a desire to build a new life for himself. Lucas found work as a handyman, doing odd jobs around town for the local residents. He was good with his hands, and his charm and good looks quickly made him a favorite among the town's older women, who often hired him to help with tasks around their homes. It was during one of these jobs that he first met Elena. She had hired him to fix a leaky faucet in her kitchen, and from the moment they met, there was a connection between them. Elena was immediately struck by Lucas's youthful energy and easy smile. He was polite, respectful, and seemed genuinely interested in her life. As they talked, Elena found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone in years. Lucas, in turn, was drawn to Elena's warmth and the sense of calm that surrounded her. She was different from the women he had known in the city, more mature, more grounded, and with a quiet strength that he admired. Their relationship began innocently enough. Lucas would stop by the bakery for coffee and a chat whenever he was in the area, and Elena would always make time for him. Over the weeks, their conversations grew longer, and they began to share more about their lives. Elena told Lucas about her late husband, about Emily, and about the loneliness that had crept into her life since Richard's death. Lucas, in turn, opened up about his troubled past, his regrets, and his hopes for the future. Despite the age difference, there was a mutual understanding and respect between them. Elena appreciated Lucas's honesty and his desire to better himself, while Lucas admired Elena's resilience and the life she had built despite the hardships she had faced. As time went on, their friendship deepened, and Elena found herself looking forward to Lucas's visits more than she cared to admit. For Lucas, Elena became a source of stability and comfort. She was different from anyone he had ever known, wise, compassionate, and with a depth of experience that he found fascinating. He enjoyed spending time with her, and he began to seek out her company more and more. The other women in town, though kind and generous, didn't hold the same appeal for him. There was something about Elena that drew him in, something that made him want to be a better man. It wasn't long before their relationship began to evolve into something more than just friendship. The turning point came on a warm summer evening when Lucas had finished a job at Elena's house. She invited him to stay for dinner, and as they sat in the cozy kitchen, sharing a bottle of wine, the atmosphere between them shifted. The conversation flowed easily, and there was a closeness between them that hadn't been there before. As the night wore on, they found themselves sitting closer together, their hands brushing against each other as they talked. When Lucas leaned in to kiss her, it was as if time had stopped. Elena's heart raced, and for a moment she hesitated. But then she realized how much she had longed for this, for the touch of a man, for the feeling of being wanted and desired. She kissed him back, and in that moment everything changed. Their kiss was the beginning of a passionate affair that took them both by surprise. For Elena, it was like rediscovering a part of herself that she had thought was lost forever. She hadn't felt this alive in years, and the attention and affection Lucas showered on her made her feel young and vibrant again. She loved the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, and the way he made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. Lucas, too, was swept up in the intensity of their relationship. He had never been with a woman like Elena before, and he was captivated by her maturity and the way she carried herself with such grace and confidence. Being with her made him feel special, like he had found something rare and precious. He enjoyed the thrill of their secret romance, the way they had to keep it hidden from the prying eyes of the town. It was exciting, and for a while it seemed like nothing could go wrong. However, as their relationship deepened, so did the complexities that came with it. Elena was acutely aware of the age difference between them, and though she tried to push those thoughts aside, they nagged at her in the quiet moments. She knew that Lucas was young, that he still had his whole life ahead of him, and that someday he might want things that she couldn't give him. The thought of losing him terrified her, and that fear began to take root in her heart. For Lucas, the initial excitement of their affair started to give way to doubts. He cared for Elena deeply, but he also couldn't ignore the fact that their relationship was far from conventional. He missed the carefree days of his youth, the freedom to explore the world and make mistakes without the weight of responsibility. As much as he enjoyed being with Elena, he began to wonder if he was ready to commit to someone so much older, someone whose life was already well established. The first signs of trouble appeared in the form of small disagreements. Elena, sensing Lucas's restlessness, tried to hold on to him tighter, while Lucas, feeling the pressure, started to pull away. They argued about little things: his late nights out with friends, her constant need for reassurance, and the differences in their lifestyles. But beneath those arguments lay a deeper issue: the fear that their love wasn't strong enough to overcome the challenges they faced. Despite the growing tension, neither of them wanted to let go. Elena couldn't bear the thought of being alone again, and Lucas, despite his doubts, still felt a strong connection to her. They continued to see each other, but the easy companionship they had once shared was slowly being replaced by a sense of unease. Elena's love for Lucas began to turn into an obsession, and she found herself constantly worrying about losing him. She started to watch him more closely, questioning his every move and growing increasingly suspicious of his interactions with other women. Lucas, in turn, became more secretive, not wanting to provoke another argument. Their relationship, as the summer days began to shorten and the crisp autumn air crept into Maplewood, the once passionate and thrilling romance between Elena and Lucas began to unravel. What had started as a secretive, intense connection was now showing signs of strain, with the differences between them becoming increasingly apparent. The idyllic world they had created together, hidden from the judgmental eyes of the town, was starting to crack, and both of them could feel it. Elena, now 51, was acutely aware that she was aging. The mirror, once a friend that reflected a youthful glow, now betrayed the signs of timelines etched around her eyes and mouth, the slight sag of her skin, and the graying strands that she meticulously dyed to maintain the illusion of youth. But more than the physical signs of aging, it was the growing insecurity gnawing at her that troubled her the most. Lucas had become distant. The easy smiles, the spontaneous affection, and the long, meaningful conversations that had once defined their relationship were now few and far between. Elena noticed how he spent more time on his phone, often texting late into the night with a furrowed brow, and how he seemed to avoid making plans with her, opting instead to go out with friends or, worse, spend time alone. Every small action, every missed call, every time he looked away when she tried to catch his eye, fueled her growing paranoia. She found herself slipping into obsessive behavior, something she never imagined herself capable of. In the past, she had been a confident, self-assured woman who took pride in her independence and strength. But with Lucas, she was different. She felt vulnerable, exposed, and increasingly desperate to hold on to him, even as she felt him slipping through her fingers. Elena began to check his phone when he wasn't looking, scrolling through messages and call logs, searching for any sign of betrayal. She would drive by the places she knew he frequented, trying to catch a glimpse of him, to see if he was with someone else. She started showing up at his apartment unannounced, under the pretense of wanting to surprise him, but really to reassure herself that he wasn't hiding anything from her. At first, Lucas didn't notice the change. He was too caught up in his own thoughts, wrestling with the confusion and doubt that had taken hold of him. He still cared for Elena deeply, but the weight of their relationship was beginning to feel suffocating. He missed the freedom of his youth, the carefree days when he didn't have to answer to anyone or worry about the future. Being with Elena had given him stability, something he had craved after the chaos of his past, but now that stability felt like a cage. He found himself increasingly drawn to other women, particularly those closer to his own age. It wasn't that he wanted to be unfaithful to Elena, but the differences between them were becoming harder to ignore. He missed the excitement of being with someone who shared his interests, who could match his energy and enthusiasm for life. Elena's life was settled, predictable, and while that had been comforting at first, it was now a source of frustration for him. One evening, after a particularly tense day, Lucas met up with some friends at a local bar. It was a place he had started going to more often, a place where he could relax and forget about the complexities of his relationship with Elena. That night, he met a young woman named Sarah. She was vibrant, outgoing, and full of life, everything that Elena wasn't. They talked, laughed, and shared a few drinks, and for the first time in a long while, Lucas felt like his old self again. The attraction between Lucas and Sarah was immediate and undeniable. She was drawn to his rugged charm and the air of mystery that surrounded him, while he was captivated by her carefree spirit and the ease with which she moved through life. As the night went on, they grew closer, their conversation becoming more intimate. Lucas knew that he was treading dangerous ground, but in that moment he didn't care. He was tired of feeling trapped, and Sarah represented an escape, a chance to reclaim the freedom he had lost. Elena, meanwhile, was at home, anxiously waiting for Lucas to return. She had called him several times throughout the evening, but each call had gone unanswered, only increasing her worry. She tried to distract herself with work, with television, with anything that would keep her mind from wandering to dark places, but nothing worked. All she could think about was Lucas and the nagging fear that he was with someone else. When Lucas finally came home in the early hours of the morning, Elena was waiting for him. The moment he walked through the door, she could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the tiredness in his eyes, and the guilt that he tried so hard to hide. She didn't say anything at first, didn't accuse him or ask where he had been. She just looked at him, searching his face for any sign of the man she had fallen in love with. But Lucas was distant, distracted, and when she tried to reach out to him, he brushed her off, saying he was tired and just wanted to sleep. Elena's heart sank. This wasn't the man she knew, the man who had once been so attentive, so affectionate. Something had changed, and she could feel the growing distance between them like a chasm that was too wide to bridge. Over the next few days, the tension between them grew. Elena's attempts to reconnect with Lucas were met with indifference or irritation, and Lucas became more withdrawn, spending less time with her and more time away from home. Elena's anxiety reached new heights, and she became increasingly desperate to hold on to him. She began to question him constantly: where he was going, who he was with, why he was late. Every answer he gave only fueled her suspicions, and every time he tried to reassure her, she found it harder to believe him. Their arguments became more frequent, more heated, and more hurtful. Elena accused Lucas of seeing other women, of losing interest in her, of wanting to leave her for someone younger. Lucas, in turn, grew defensive, denying her accusations and lashing out at her for not trusting him. He couldn't understand why she was acting this way, why the woman he had once admired for her strength and independence had become so clingy and insecure. The more they fought, the more Elena's behavior spiraled out of control. She started following Lucas whenever he left the house, watching him from a distance, trying to catch him in a lie. She called his friends, pretending to be concerned, but really to find out if he was with another woman. She even went so far as to hire a private investigator, someone who could confirm her worst fears. Lucas, oblivious to the extent of Elena's obsession, continued to drift further away. He began spending more time with Sarah, finding solace in her company, in the simplicity of their relationship. With Sarah, there were no expectations, no demands, no past to haunt him. He could just be himself, without the weight of guilt or responsibility. But as much as he enjoyed being with Sarah, he couldn't bring himself to end things with Elena. He still cared for her, still felt a sense of loyalty and obligation to her, even though their relationship was crumbling. The turning point came one evening when Elena, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, confronted Lucas with the evidence she had gathered. She had followed him to Sarah's apartment, had seen them together, had watched as they laughed and kissed, oblivious to the world around them. Her heart had shattered into a million pieces, and now she stood before him, holding out the photos, her hands shaking with rage and despair. Lucas was stunned. He hadn't realized how far Elena had gone, how deep her obsession had become. He tried to explain, to tell her that it wasn't what it looked like, that he was just confused, that he still cared about her. But Elena was beyond reason. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly destroyed. The man she had loved, the man she had given everything to, had betrayed her in the worst possible way. Their argument that night was explosive. Elena's anger, fueled by months of suspicion and fear, erupted like a volcano. She screamed at Lucas, accusing him of lying to her, of making a fool of her, of throwing away everything they had for a meaningless fling. Lucas, caught between guilt and frustration, tried to defend himself, but his words only made things worse. He couldn't deny what she had seen, couldn't erase the evidence that was right in front of her. In the heat of the moment, Elena slapped Lucas, the force of her emotions driving her to an act of violence that shocked them both. Lucas staggered back, stunned, and for a moment, there was silence between them, the air thick with tension. Elena, horrified by what she had done, broke down in tears, her anger giving way to despair. She begged Lucas to forgive her, to stay with her, to give her another chance. She promised that she would change, that she would be better, that she would do anything to make things right. But Lucas had reached his breaking point. The slap, combined with the months of mounting tension, was the final straw. He couldn't take it anymore, the constant suspicion, the arguments, the feeling of being trapped in a relationship that was tearing him apart. He told Elena that he needed space, that he couldn't do this anymore, that he needed time to think. He packed a bag and left that night, leaving Elena alone in the house that had once been their sanctuary. The weeks that followed Lucas's abrupt departure were some of the darkest in Elena's life. Her once comfortable home felt cold and empty, echoing with the memories of a love that had slipped through her fingers. The days were long and torturous, filled with a sense of loss and despair that clung to her like a shroud. The nights were even worse, haunted by dreams of Lucas with another woman, his face twisted in anger and disappointment. Elena spent most of her time in a haze of regret and self-pity. She tried to keep up appearances, going through the motions of daily life with a forced smile and a pretense of normalcy, but inside she was shattered. Her friends and neighbors noticed the change in her, the way her once vibrant eyes now looked dull and lifeless, and how she seemed to be losing weight and sleep. They offered their condolences and support, but Elena barely registered their concern. She was too consumed by her own pain to offer much more than a polite thank you. In her moments of solitude, Elena replayed the arguments and confrontations with Lucas over and over in her mind. She couldn't believe how quickly things had unraveled, how a relationship that had once brought her so much joy had devolved into a series of accusations and betrayals. She blamed herself for driving Lucas away, for not being able to hold on to the love they had shared. The guilt was overwhelming, and she found herself sinking deeper into a well of depression. One evening, as the autumn leaves fell outside her window, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She could no longer bear the agony of her heartache, nor could she accept the reality of losing Lucas forever. The obsession that had once driven her to monitor his every move now consumed her with a different kind of desperation, a desire to end the pain that had become unbearable. Elena reached out to Lucas, hoping against hope that he might respond. She sent him messages, left voicemails, and even tried to contact him through friends, but there was no reply. Lucas had cut off all communication, needing the space to sort out his life and escape the toxic environment that had developed between them. He had begun to rebuild his life with Sarah, trying to move past the tumultuous relationship with Elena. Frustrated and heartbroken, Elena decided to confront Lucas one final time. She resolved to see him, to make him understand how much she had suffered, and perhaps to beg for a chance to make things right. It was a reckless decision, fueled by her emotional turmoil and the conviction that if she could just explain herself, Lucas might reconsider. On a cold and rainy evening, Elena drove to Lucas's new apartment. The drive was long and fraught with anxiety, but she was determined. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each more desperate than the last. She had packed a small bag with a few personal items, letters she had written, photographs, and a small gift she hoped might soften his heart. As she neared his apartment, her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and hope that clouded her judgment. When she arrived, she saw Lucas's car parked outside and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She walked up to the door and knocked, her hands trembling. After a few moments, Lucas opened it, his face showing surprise and then a flicker of something like pity. He had been expecting an argument or perhaps another attempt at reconciliation, but not this, a solemn, defeated Elena standing on his doorstep. "Lucas," she began, her voice cracking with emotion, "I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I needed to see you. Please, can we talk?" Lucas hesitated, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. He could see the pain in Elena's eyes, the weariness that had replaced the vibrant woman he had once known. He wanted to help her, to offer some solace, but he also feared what might happen if they fell back into their old patterns. Reluctantly, he let her in, leading her to the small living room where they had once shared so many intimate moments. Elena sat down, clutching her bag tightly, as Lucas took a seat across from her. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fireplace. Elena took out the letters and photographs, placing them on the coffee table between them. She looked at Lucas with tearful eyes, hoping he would see her sincerity and the depth of her regret. "I know I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "I was scared and insecure, and I didn't handle things the way I should have. But I love you, Lucas. I really do. I just want to make things right." Lucas looked at the items on the table, at the woman he had once loved, and felt a pang of sympathy. But the feelings he had for Elena were no longer what they once were. The trust had been broken, and the pain he had experienced was still fresh. He had moved on, started a new chapter with Sarah, and he was determined not to let his past with Elena derail his progress. "I can't do this anymore," Elena, Lucas said finally, his voice firm but gentle. "I care about you, but our relationship was toxic. We both need to move on and find happiness elsewhere. I'm with someone else now, and I need you to respect that." Elena's heart sank as she heard his words. The finality of them hit her hard, and she felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. She had hoped for reconciliation, for a chance to mend what was broken, but instead she was faced with the painful reality that Lucas was done with their relationship. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process his words. She wanted to argue, to plead for another chance, but the look in Lucas's eyes told her that the decision was final. The pain was overwhelming, and in her distraught state, Elena felt a dark thought creep into her mind, a thought that she had been trying to suppress for weeks. If she couldn't have Lucas, if she couldn't fix the mess she had made, then perhaps there was only one way to end the suffering. Elena stood up abruptly, her movements hurried and frantic. She grabbed the letters and photographs, shoving them back into her bag, and turned to leave. Lucas followed her to the door, concern etched on his face. "Elena, wait. Are you okay?" But Elena didn't answer. She rushed out of the apartment, her mind racing. As she got into her car, she felt an overwhelming sense of despair and rage. The world outside seemed to spin in a blur as she drove through the rain-slicked streets, her thoughts dark and chaotic. Her destination was clear: she needed to confront Sarah, the woman she saw as the catalyst for her heartbreak. She had no clear plan, only a driving need to lash out, to release the anger and pain that had consumed her. As she arrived at Sarah's apartment building, she felt a sense of cold determination settle over her. Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady her shaking hands as she climbed the stairs to Sarah's apartment. The confrontation with Sarah was brief and tumultuous. In a fit of rage and desperation, Elena confronted Sarah, accusing her of destroying her life and taking away the man she loved. The confrontation escalated quickly, and in a moment of unrestrained fury, Elena attacked Sarah. The struggle that ensued was chaotic and violent. Sarah fought back, but Elena was fueled by a dark, unhinged determination. In the end, the situation spiraled out of control, and Elena, in a moment of uncontrollable anger, inflicted fatal harm upon Sarah. The reality of what she had done hit Elena with a jarring clarity, but by then it was too late. The consequences of her actions were irreversible. As the police arrived, responding to the emergency calls from neighbors who had heard the commotion, Elena stood amidst the aftermath of her rage, a broken woman facing the consequences of her obsession. The once tranquil life she had known was shattered beyond repair. The town of Maplewood, once a place of quiet comfort and community, was now a place marred by the tragic events that had unfolded. Elena was arrested and charged with Sarah's murder. Her trial was widely covered, and the story of her obsessive love and the resulting tragedy became a cautionary tale of how unchecked emotions and actions could lead to devastating consequences. Lucas, devastated by the events, struggled to cope with the aftermath. He had lost someone he cared about, and the guilt of the situation weighed heavily on him. He tried to find solace in his new life, but the shadow of the past lingered, a constant reminder of the pain and turmoil that had resulted from the ill-fated relationship with Elena. For Elena, the consequences of her actions were a lifetime of regret and sorrow. The love she had once cherished had turned into a nightmare, and the only thing left was the cold reality of the prison walls that now enclosed her. Her story became a tragic reminder of how love, when consumed by obsession and unchecked emotions, could lead to the most devastating of outcomes.